welcome everyone to our training on Acumatica custom user fields. My name is Stuart Blumenthal, and I will be doing the presentation today. Also with me is Jason Schwartz, who will be kind of my moderator, asking questions, answering some of the questions, and kind of just making sure we answer the questions in the GoToWebinar. Just so that you have an introduction for this purpose, first of all your lines are on mute. Let me make sure we get on. All your lines are on mute. So please, use the questions feature within the GoToWebinar. We are going to be doing these webinars more frequently, especially during this time of the year. We've got a lot of people asking some questions, and instead of doing one-on-one trainings with clients where we know there's value to a lot of people, if we have a good topic, we are going to make these into like a every other or every once a month we'll do a webinar on something that people have asked a lot of questions about, and we'll keep these short. So as you'll see today, this one's just about 30 minutes, and again, the goal is just to have you learn. We are recording this, so if there's afterwards, if anyone wants a copy of the PowerPoint or wants a copy of the webinar, please let me know regarding that. So let's just get right down to it, since this is just a training exercise. So there's three ways. When people want to add fields to the screens, there are three different ways of doing that. The first one is doing something called an attribute. And what attributes are is that it's a way of saying, like in a master file setup, it's a way of setting up custom fields. And we'll talk about these more in detail in a moment. The second way of doing it is something called a user-defined field. So those are in certain screens, such as your AP bill screen or your sales order screen or your purchase order screen, that you can add something called user-defined fields, which are kind of an extension of attributes, but they allow you to enter information basically at a transaction level at that point. And then the third way of adding fields to the screen is to use the customization tool, which is built into the product. You guys can do that. And what that is great for is for adding fields to the grids, adding them to areas that you want to add them to. And this will make more sense as we go through the different screens. So let's talk about attributes. So basically, when you're setting up a customer, a vendor, an item, a project, a lead, opportunity, a service order, or a field service, those are known as master files within Acumatica. Those you can add, basically create something called an attribute, like a custom field under there. They're based upon the classes. So for example, your customer class, if you have multiple customer classes, an attribute would be assigned to multiple, you could have different attributes for different classes. So for example, if you were tracking in accounts payable, your 1099 vendors is one class and your employees is a different class, you might have different attributes you want to track with that. And that's what that ability is to do. These are very, very, very easy to add, and we will actually do a demonstration of that. They can be added to generic inquiries, which are like your lookups, and they're not an issue for upgrades. So during upgrades, these custom fields are very, very easy. And again, we'll go through each, we'll actually demonstrate them within Acumatica. So basically what we're going to show you later is going into the attributes screen. Now I will show you the screen number up here. One of the things I'm going to also show you is that if you always know if you know the screen number, there's a quick shortcut without having to go through the menus. You can actually just type in the screen number, and that's an easy way to get to a screen within Acumatica. So for example, what we'll be going through a little bit later is setting up an attribute, and you can see that you have different types of you can set up as a text box, a combo box, a multi-select combo box, a checkbox, or a date time. And if you do, like for example, a combo box, you can have your different color or your different values down here in the lower right-hand corner. And again, as we talked about, you assign attributes to the classes. So for example, one type of item or one type of vendor or one type of customer might have different attributes than a different one, and that's how those are designed. Again, the second type of field that you add is something called a user-defined field. So again, as I mentioned before, these are on invoices, bills, sales orders, purchase order screens. Basically, I call them transaction screens. And if you ever go to your customization in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see the word Manage User-Defined field. Now, a lot of people ask, hey, I don't see that button up there called customization. That's okay. That means you just don't have security permissions for that. And that's something we can help you set up if needed. But that's where this customization menu, if you don't see that, it's a permissions issue within Acumatica. Again, these are easy to add. These are easy to add fields. You can definitely do them yourself. You do not need us to do that. They can be added to the generic inquiries. They're not an issue for upgrades, but again, they cannot be added to the grids, and it can only add itself to the custom tab of a screen. So what you'll see in my next example here is that within the invoices screen, for example, you'll be able to click on edit the user-defined fields, and then when you're in a screen, for example, here's my invoice number, but it adds a tab up top, so it makes a tab for document and then adds a tab for user-defined fields. And again, we'll go through that example, but that's the one thing that with those screens is that it puts them onto a specific tab. You don't have the luxury of saying, hey, I want them on the main tab, for example. Now, the last one is that it is customization. So fields can be added anywhere on the screen, including the grids. And where you would do is under the customization, you would do something called edit project. You can create your own tabs on the screen. It is highly recommended that you take the customization class from Acumatica if you want to get into this at all. This is something that both myself and Jason have gone in and done amazing things with the customizations. But at the same time, you really need to understand what it does. And, there's a lot of complexity behind there. When you're doing this type of work, it's also recommended that you do this in a non-production environment so you don't mess up your day-to-day system. And again, these can be added to the generic inquiries, but for upgrades, anything that's done through a customization needs to be tested. We definitely want to make sure that you test everything, and that's part of your upgrade process is testing those customizations out. So let's just jump right into the product. Let's go through each one by one. And if there's any questions, let us know. So the first thing I'm going to do is set up an attribute. So when you're ever in the Acumatica screen, if you don't know where something is located, it's very easy to come up here and start typing in attribute. And basically what you'll see is that it brings up my menu items up here, and there's two attributes. There's one specifically for projects. We're not going to get into that today. And then there's another one under the configuration, under common settings, called attributes. And what we would be able to do under here is that this is where we would list out all of our custom fields. So my screen's coming up. For some reason, it's taking a little bit longer. And of course, my system timed out. So for those, I'm just running this locally, and I apologize for that. This is what they call demo hell sometimes. And this is very embarrassing here. Here we go. Let's try that again. So we're going to just do attribute there. And we're going to go to attributes. And at this point here, it brings us to that screen. Now, one of the things that I did tell you is that if you ever know the screen number up here, you could just type that in. So for example, where it says company ID equals sales demo and screen ID is equal to, and if you knew that number there, you could just type that in up there. That was kind of a little shortcut as well of navigating through Acumatica. Here I can put in, take an existing attribute. So these, as you can see, I have a lot of attributes in my system here. I created one called air bill. And basically what you do is you create an ID, your description, and is it a text box or not? You can say, again, what your other values here are. If it's internal, contains personal data, which means that it is encrypted, you can put a entry mask and a required expiration on there. So for example, at this point here, very easy, as you can see here, to just kind of set up your different ones. When you do things like color, for example, you'll see that you can put a sort order down below in the area down here. So let's say that I would like that let's say that I wanted to set up something new here, like referred by. So what we're going to do is I'm going to create a new field here. I'm going to call this referred by. I'm going to referred by, and I'm just going to make that a text field. Now you do have a set length of the text here. You can't make this shorter or longer. This is a hard-coded field, and I'll show you that in a moment. So once that attribute's now been set up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my accounts receivable here, and I'm going to go to my customer classes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my key customer here, which is a division or my class, and I'm going to go to my attributes tab. Now you'll see that I have one under there. We were doing a little demo for another client, but I'm going to click on the plus sign here and simply just grab that one that we did, that referred by. Now, because I don't like going through all the different types of pages, I just start typing it up here, referred, and I just come up here. One thing you want to prevent yourself from doing when you're in this little search up here is hitting the enter button, because it just selects something. So start typing REF, and then double click on that, and it's asked me the order that I want to put this in. So if I wanted this one first and that other one second, it will then show up that way on the screen at that point. I'm going to hit save and close, and what I'm going to do now is go right to my customers, and I'm going to go into one of my customers that has that's for my customer class of key, which is my bartending school, one of my most popular customers. And I'm going to go to my attributes, and you can see now I can say here what's value, and I'm just going to say this was referred by Jason. So now if I wanted to have that information, that is now stored in the system. You'll see that these fields here, they text fields, they I think are 50 characters. Yep, they're 50 characters. Actually, whoops, I take that back. They're a little bit, I think they're actually longer than that, but they're minimum 50 characters you get in that little value there. And you can spread this out and make this longer. One of the things about attributes, again, is that you cannot put them anywhere else on the screen, so they are under this attributes area over here. But again, it's a great way of recording information. Any questions regarding that? I don't see any questions. So what we're going to do is that we're going to now set up another one for our invoice. So if I go to, I'm going to hit save and close just for fun here. If I go to my account, my invoices now, let's say that, for example, when I'm entering an invoice in the system, I want to add another field up here. And so what I'm going to do here is that you'll see that I created one already up here, but I'm going to create another one here. So when for example, what I'm going to do is that you come to customization here, and you click on Manage User Defined Field. This brings us into that little screen I had in my PowerPoint. So we have a couple things here. It says we can add a user-defined field or manage the attributes. Well, I believe these should be in a different order. They should be manage the attributes and then add the user-defined field, because you have to have the attribute defined first. That's the most important thing. So if I go to my manage attributes, I can put in here, again, I can see all my different fields down here. It's the same field, so it can be used in multiple locations. So what I'm going to do is use that referred by. I could have set up another field, but what I'm going to do at this point here, so I got my attribute set up. Now that I have that attribute set up, I click on say add user defined field, and I'm going to say I want that referred by. I'm going to type in REF, not hit the enter key. Choose referred by. Now it's asking which column do I want this in and which row. So my column, I'm going to keep this in column 1, and in row, and this was row 3. I think I added something else in there. So I'm just going to click OK at this point here. It automatically shrunk it together at this point here. So now if I go back and hit the, if I hit the back button, even though it said, hey, Oops, we got a little bit of an issue. Let's go back to my customization here, um, and manage, edit. Let's remove this one here, and I'm going to move this, and then I'm going to add that back. Referred by, put in 1-1. It looks like there was an issue there, possibly. So I'm going to close that out. And at this point now, it got it. So I must have had something it broken in my system, and that was mine doing demoing and playing around with it. So now you'll see that I have that referred by here. So I can now update that for anything that I want. I can keep anything in there. So actually, let's put that, make that a little bit nicer. Let's add Jason back to that field. So you'll see that again, user defined fields come under customization, manage user defined fields, and they are under most of the data entry screens. So again, I'm in under receivables. If I went to my bills and payments, you can see that I have one underneath here, for example, user defined fields there. And, we can go really complex and, or, again, even under purchase order here, if I had my purchase orders and there were specific fields that I was looking for under here, I don't have one under here yet, but if I did, I would just simply go to manage user defined fields. As long as you see this on the screen, then it will allow you to create that additional tab up top. Any questions regarding that? I'm just going to make sure we're going to hold off for a second before I go into the last one, which is a customization, and just to kind of make sure that everyone has a chance to answer anything. So the question that came in was that, so it was about attributes. So are user defined fields attributes? And the answer is yes. So they are attributes within the system. So that's how the system is used. It's basically they took attributes and made them to a purchase order. They're adding them to the transaction screens instead. Now, one of the last things I will show you is that we were just, example of a screen customization. So if you go to customization here, let's go to sales order, for example. One of the things that we did recently for one of our clients is that they wanted some additional fields added to the screen. So if you go into a sales order here, what we will see very quickly is that they wanted some additional fields up here. The date the PO was sent, the date the PO was received, and the date the payment was received. And you can see we added those fields up here. And then down here below, what we were able to do is that we added some columns here, like full sales amount. Even though it's not affecting our totals up here, they wanted to see that information in the grid. And the way we did that one is that we basically went in to edit the project. So what we ended up doing for them is that if you bring up the customization project, it asks you which screen do you want to modify. Because we're in the sales order screen, I previously had this one here. I clicked on the sales order screen. And what's nice about this is that it brings us into our screen editor, basically. You'll see that on the up here, that if you kind of envisioned it, under our forms, we have our different columns. So as you can see, the order type, order header, if I went back to that one screen, you'll see that here's my column 1, here's my column 2, here's my column 3 at that point. So you can see how they actually did that. So column 1 has that information, column 2, column 3. What we did was we simply added a new column. And so what we can do is we can do something called add controls. And I simply dragged this column up to here. And what it does is that it will add itself as a column down here in my form. Very straightforward. Then once I'm highlighted on that, what we're able to then do is click on add data fields. And under here, here's all our data fields. We can actually click on create a new field, and we can actually choose what information we want to have. What type of field is this? Is this a string? Is this a decimal, a date time, a GUID, an integer, or a Boolean? Yes, which is a yes, no, a checkbox. You can enter this information in, but one of the nice things is you can specify the length. So the nice thing about the customization aspect is that you're able to do this within the system. This is more meant for the advanced users, but again, something that you have part of your base system that you can customize the screens if you want. What I really wanted to focus on today was the attributes, and showing you they have the ability to create those attributes. I know that one of the people on the phone call, I'm not going to mention names, when I looked at their system, I think they had over 150 custom attributes they had added to the system. I think it might even be higher, but it's amazing the number of attributes they set up by themselves within the system, and it's just a testament of how easy it is to add those to the system. I'm not going to save any of my changes today, so I'm going to leave. So again, the nice thing about these things is that we're able to add fields, add screens without truly getting a programmer or a coder involved. We're able to do all this in there. So kind of my tips are, if you're adding fields, really make sure that you document what are you adding them for. What is the purpose? And the first question I always ask is there another field out there we can possibly repurpose? Can we change a label or something like that? If we need to add a field, what type of field is it? What's the length? Where does it go? What type of what do you need it for? And then more importantly, for example, what do you need to change on it? What do you need? Where is that field needed? Is it needed in a report? Is it needed in a lookup somewhere? Things like that. And that's really the important aspects of, figuring out, those are the questions you need to ask yourself before adding a field to the screen. So with that, actually I'm at 23 minutes, so we're at 7 minutes left, and I allocated the last 5 minutes for questions, Q&A, stuff like that. So I'm going to let anyone ask any questions along the way at this point here. Does everyone need to be out of the system? So the answer is, so when you're adding attributes, people do not need to be out of Acumatica in order to do that. So for the user-defined fields or user-defined fields or the attributes, people do not need to be out of the system. People can just be in there with no issues whatsoever. If they're in that screen, when they refresh, when they refresh the screen, that's when they'll see it at that time. So unless it's a screen that you want people to start entering stuff in, they really don't need to be out of the system in order to add these fields. So they can be done with everyone in the system. Again, just be careful what you're doing. Sometimes if you want to do this in a test company or test tenant, that, as they call it, that's really important. So when I say a test tenant, is that when you log out here, for example, when I log in Acumatica, you can see that I have multiple tenants in my system here. So you can have multiple tenants. And so think about that. It's good to do it in one, make sure it works the way you want it to, and then do it in the other one. Customizations can be moved from one tenant to another. Attributes will have to be set up from scratch. So just keep that in mind, that if you have multiple tenants, attributes will have to be manually entered. Customizations, the last thing that I showed, moves over automatically. So great question. Thank you for asking that, because it allowed me to answer a couple other questions along the way. How long does it take to add? It doesn't take very long to add those attributes at all. Again, it kind of really depends upon what you're going to be using them for. Again, if you need to modify a report, that might take a little bit longer. If you need to modify a generic inquiry, those are a lot easier. And someone's asking a question, what is a generic inquiry? So when you go into a lookup, for example, and I'm going to go into my lookup here, this right here is called a generic inquiry. It's giving me my customer ID, my name, my class, my country, city, currency, things like that. You can come up here and click on something called Edit the Generic Inquiry up here in the upper right-hand corner. Now, when you do this, this brings us into basically a query builder, a query-driven product. And so what we have is our tables here, our customer and our address and our business account. We have to join them together, otherwise we will get a lot of wrong information in the system. We can create parameters, conditions, groupings. We can sort it by certain ways. But under our results grid here, we are able to actually add fields. So for example, oops, I hit the wrong button. I hit the delete instead of the plus. But if I wanted to hit this here and say, you know what, I want my attributes at this point here, I can start coming down here at this point here, and I can start finding those fields that I just entered in. Now, notice that that referred by here, what's beautiful about this is that it has it as an underscore, the word attribute, so it's easy to find that field. And now all I'm going to do is save that change. Now, if I come back to my customer screen, my customer list, notice I did refresh that. Notice that now Jason shows up in my list. So these are my generic inquiries that are used in many different areas within the system, but adding a attribute or customizing these makes it very easy. Now I can search and sort by that information very easily under the referred by aspect. So again, if you have any questions, let us know. But if you have any questions along the way after this, please feel free to reach out to myself or Jason. You can. These are our phone numbers, email address. Feel free to reach out. Also, at this point here, here's our contact information at NetAtWork. And if you have any questions along the way, if there's any trainings that you want, if you felt that this was valuable, great. If there's any feedback, I'd always will take it. But if there's any questions along the way, feel free to let us know. We're always looking for to do different classes, and if there's any feedback on classes, again, obviously these are free of charge. We want to make them fun for everyone and a learning experience. And with that, I'm going to end the call today. So with 2 minutes extra back in your day. Thank you very much for the positive feedback. Appreciate it. Thank you again for the other one we just received. Thank you. Have a great day, guys. Take care.